name is Steve Ward. I am your host for today's session. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us and listen to us. I do want to make it as interactive as possible. We are here today to talk to you about a bunch of hopefully, useful tools that we have made available to you to sort of support community enablement around this move to 643 and 11.6.1 under PCI DSS 4.0, really around the move to e-skimming security, which was never really in scope in previous versions. And there's a lot to do. And so we're trying to make sure that we're extending a helping hand to help you do that. So let's get jumping in. A little bit of background on Source Defense, just so you know who we are, who you're talking to. We have been doing this e-skimming security game for the better part of, I would say, 8 years now. Really pioneered in the space. We look at it as protecting data at the point of capture. If you're storied in the security world or in the PCI world, you may think of things in terms of data in transit, data at rest. The ball has moved, and we're providing solutions that support protection of data as it's being entered into the forms on the modern website. So data at the point of capture. We're a web security tool. So if you're trying to sort of categorize where you would put this focus or where you would put these new requirements squarely in web security, sort of the second half of web security. Server side is fairly hardened, but the client side, where the consumer is conducting the business with you, is really an open field space in terms of security controls. It's about third-party service integration. We really look at ourselves as an enabler in that regard. We want you to be able to have all of the partners that make your websites efficient and effective and dynamic and useful for your consumers. We bring to the market a solution that really addresses the last mile of third-party risk management. So I call out all of those things just because as we've had dialogue with countless merchants over the course of the last, say, year or so, a lot of the question comes, well, how do I tell the organization what this is, why I have to do it, where I need to put it, from a budgetary perspective, et cetera. So just offer those things up, that it's a web security, third party risk type of approach that PCI is now calling for you, to focus on. We address what we think is both a data security and a data privacy compliance issue. And I'll talk a little bit about the data privacy issue as we go along. Obviously, you're here because PCI DSS 4.0 mandates a focus on e-skimming security. But if you're an organization that has a multi-dimensional compliance focus, I know there's a bunch of GRC folks on the call today. It's also an issue that is addressed under GDPR. Or if you're in the healthcare space or deal in the healthcare world, one that touches HIPAA and one in the consumer finance side of things that touches on FFIEC. So this really is an approach that PCI is calling for controls that has impact into other compliance regimes, maybe not as firmly mandated, but I'll explain a little bit about that as we go along. And so I think, one good piece of news is that, in the council's move to get us focusing on client-side security, on e-skimming security, you're also protecting yourselves against other forms of compliance requirements for data privacy and for data confidentiality. Real quick background on us. I mentioned the fact that we've been in market for a while. We're supporting more than 1,000 of the world's largest brands. It's roughly $45 billion in online commerce that we protect. And we're stopping about 8 billion security and privacy violations each year. So we know what we're doing, been here for a while. Really, as it relates to the conversation today, it's not about what we do so much as about what we want to be able to offer you and help you with. Source Defense is a PCI PPO. What that means is we are engaged heavily with the council. We're a principal participating organization. It means we have a seat at the table in terms of guiding and influencing the direction of the standard, and that we obviously have a lot of concern about community. And I think if you ask around, if you've just started to get experience with Source Defense, but ask around, what you'll hear is that for the better part of the last year, Source Defense really has been about community enablement. We've been talking to all of the QSAs that we can get a hold of in the world, all the QSACs, the firms they work with. We've probably spoken to, I don't know, something on an order of like 2,000 or 3,000 QSAs. and a similar number of merchants in the process. We do want to drive, the security of cardholder data forward, and that's what I prepared for us today to talk about is free tools to help the community, things that can help support your journey as you take these first steps into this new area of focus. And so, as you read in the stuff that we reached out to you with, we've got a number of things. We've got some scoping support, and I'll provide some detail on scope here in the presentation. We've got some guidance on build versus buy or build versus procure. I'll go into a little bit of that as well. We've got and want to make available to you team education and ask me anything sessions. This is a hard subject to get the hands around. There's a lot of players involved. There's security, there's GRC, there's web dev, there's potentially the marketing side of the business itself, e-coms teams, and we want to be able to help bridge the gap between internal resources, get you guys all on the same page. So we've got some sessions we can make available there. We've got a pre-project website assessment that I'll go into detail on, and one that comes along with a tool that actually helps you sort of get your hands around the beginning stages of management here. And that actually works as a really, really solid single pane of glass for enabling conversations with your QSA. And that brings us to group working sessions with your QSA. We've heard from a lot of merchants in the past months. I need my QSA to chime in. I need my QSA to talk to me. I need to understand what they're thinking. We've been, as I mentioned earlier, working with a bunch of the world's QSAs. Chances are we probably know yours, or at least the firm that yours works with, if you are obviously a level 1 merchant. And we're happy to support, sort of the bridging of the gap there far in advance of your next rock. And then we've got a 90-day action plan that can help you, get moving on this. And get up and down on it, maybe even sooner than 90 days. And I'll walk through a little bit of that as well before we get to the end of the session. So PCI 4.0, focus on e-skimming security. Why, right? Just take a little bit of the background on it, so everybody's sort of like brought up to speed. The ball has moved from protecting data in transit and data at rest to protecting data at the point of input. And it's sort of a natural evolution that's occurred based on actions that we took as a community, right? And based on things that happened that made it harder for the bad guys to steal credit card data in a card-present environment. So the EMV liability shift to 2015 effectively moved the ball down the field, made it harder for our bad guy adversaries to skim in a card-present environment. So that's fine. We're gonna shift ourselves to card not present. There are fewer controls there and a much more greenfield opportunity, to go steal, credit card data in mass. That's really where the dawn of MageCart came around. MageCart equals e-skimming, equals digital skimming, equals credential harvesting. These things that you might hear, multiple terms, kind of all speaking to the same type of threat. MageCart was given its name because the adversaries behind it, at least in the initial phases, were beaten up on the Magento e-commerce platform. So it's kind of a moniker given by the threat research world. But like 2015 EMV liability shift, right on the heels of that, MageCart emerges, right? And MageCart becomes real high profile in 2018. You got hacks like British Airways and Ticketmaster, where you got multiple hundreds of thousands, even millions, impacted by those. The landscape heats up. It actually bleeds over. The BA breach bleeds over into a pretty major first ever real GDPR fine, where the initial fine was $200 million. But at the same time, you had the pandemic breakout across the world. And so that 200 million, was reduced down to a 20 some odd million dollar fine, but still very, very material. But what happens at the same time is now we've got everybody working from home, as we all have experienced, working inside your merchant environments. You see this massive exponential uptick, right? In e-commerce sales. Really the vaulting forward, of e-commerce growth, multiple years faster than the predicted levels. So you push this quantum leap into e-commerce while at the same time, the industry really hasn't caught up with the controls and the security requirements needed, to stop these mage card attacks or these e-skimming attacks. And so high profile breaches continue, like Hannah Anderson. And then you see some shifting in the adversary to where they decide they're going to go to a one to many. And so this, really gets to sort of like, this is not just a level 1, level 2 problem, but a level 3 and 4 merchant problem as well, because the adversary can do a one to many. And I'll explain what that means. But, basically hit the smaller targets in mass, and a big shift to that. At the same time, all of this was happening, in 2018, 2019, there was a lot of focus being given, to the mage cart conversation and to the e-skimming conversation. But, right at that pandemic shift, right, the whole world sort of collapses around us. And, the real focal point from a security perspective and all the news headlines and such becomes ransomware, becomes, the protection, of the new, like, non-existing perimeter, becomes, how do you deal with millions of people and assets now working remotely, and becomes one of a software supply chain kind of focus, Cassia and others that were, real high profile in the news. So, the headlines may have shifted a bit, but the problem didn't, right? And luckily, the council saw fit, to stay focused on this problem. And in 2022, PCI 4.0 was introduced. Obviously, we're in 2024. It's been, nearly 2 years since the answer is 4.0. But obviously, they gave us a runway and a ramp before 3.2.1, was phased out, right? Which just happened, some 6 weeks ago, 6 to 8 weeks ago. At the same time, while we're waiting and while you're here exploring and looking at, your move to these skimming controls, the problem still persists and exists, and it may not be headline news, but it is, sort of, I think, reflected in a lot of the data and the research that's coming out. In 2023, there were nearly 100 million cards offered online for sale in the darknet, right? With the vast majority of those being stolen and card not present, right? Today, whether or not the compliance requirement exists, and the mandate exists until, March of next year, we have seen through our own research, and we'll be putting out, some data on this in the coming months, a 2 times increase in the digital supply chain, the use of third-party scripts, the use of these partners, which are targeted in these types of attacks. So you've got the bad guys there, you've got the attack surface expanding, you've got to focus on it, you've got data saying, this is happening real frequently. But we're moving at sort of like the speed of compliance. And so we're saying, okay, well, I don't have to do it until 2025. I would just caution everyone that the threat exists regardless of whether or not the compliance teeth are there to force the mandate. And so, just over the horizon, 2025, I'd say roughly 200 and some odd days from now, you do have to do something on it. So you guys are moving in the right direction, by getting on calls like this, exploring the market. And again, as I said at the top, it's our goal to give you tools that I'll talk about here, to really make this process move forward fast for you. One thing I do want to hammer home is, Visa calling out, the very specific requirement, here to protect the code integrations that you have on your website. That's what this is all about. And I'll go into how the attacks happen and how they work. But effectively, what Visa is saying is it's the third-party code integrations that are on your website, those tools that you use to make your website efficient and effective and dynamic. They are being, utilized by the adversary, targeted by the adversary to conduct these digital skimming attacks. They're targeting the supply chain, and they're going after these third-party service providers, in an attempt to steal PCI and PII and other forms of sensitive data. In fact, Visa said last year that 75% of all breach cases that they looked at involved the e-commerce channel. So, it's definitely moving very, very rapidly to, e-commerce is a big risk to the organization, just as much as it is a big benefit, right? To signal just, more of this frequency earlier in the year, around the February timeframe, I believe it was, Europol came out and said they had found, an attack targeting 400 plus online merchants that impacted, hundreds of thousands of consumers. So getting into how these attacks work will get you into an understanding of what you have to do and why the requirements exist in 4.0. So I'll do this in sort of a quick order, just give you a little bit of background in case you don't have it. So it's all about JavaScript, okay? And the fact is that JavaScript is, to steal the movie title, it's kind of everything everywhere all at once, right? The majority of the world's websites are built on JavaScript. Client-side security specifically deals with protecting the JavaScript that runs on those websites. To stop e-skimming, you basically put controls over top of JavaScript, and then you prevent the bad guys from having the attack surface that they need to make these things happen. The problem is that, without controls, JavaScript can do anything it wants and behave in any way it wants on the site where it's running. And so, there's no native security control in place. It basically has read-write access to everything. And so it's this very, very potent environment for a bad guy to compromise the script that is, running on your site, to do a lot of different things. And I'll get into those. We need this stuff. Okay. You can't, pull it down, and your teams are right, on the marketing and the commerce side, to continually add this stuff, because we've moved from brick and mortar to sort of like this everything digital society. And in the everything digital society, everybody wants the utmost experience, and they want everything at their fingertips as soon as possible. And it's got to be all encompassing, right? I want media, and I want video and audio, and I want, like to see my product, right? Displayed in use. So I want this multimedia functionality, in the consumer websites that I do business with. I want to see reviews, right? And I want to know what people think about the product. And I want to be suggested, for, shopping cart upsell, things that match with the product that I'm buying. I want social proof, right? But I'm talking about experience here. And so, that chat and that functionality, and that I don't want to talk to a human, but I want, great support, is another reason we have all the script running on our sites. And then we have these great tools on the back end, which are, for our own use, to improve the shopping cart value, right? So we need all this stuff. Your business needs all this stuff. It's widgets and forms and, ways to process and make orders. So much so to the point that you probably have somewhere between 12 to 18 of these third parties running on any given one of your pages. Most people don't know how many they have, and that's why one of the requirements under PCI 4.0 is to conduct an inventory. Sometimes you have things on your website that, are there and have been there for years, and nobody's managing moves, adds, changes, and deletes. Whereas you might think to yourself, well, we've done such a great job in the PCI, world of isolating and segregating out, the cart data environment and those flows, in sort of like the network world. It does not appear to be the case, really in the world of e-commerce. We still have all these scripts, running on, what effectively is the online CDE. Okay. 82% of your website is most likely not your code. Okay. And that's sort of the average of what we see, and you got things like Google Analytics and Facebook and, Meta the Pixel and X and, all these chat services. And you've got, your various and sundry different things that might be there. Right. And so you got to do something, to control what's being done. A, as we've outlined, to keep the adversary at bay, but B, as I talked about at the top end, to keep the partner from doing things that he shouldn't do that might jeopardize your requirements, to keep data secure and private. Okay. And there's more and more, I didn't get a chance to update this. There's one 2 weeks ago, more and more lawsuits around more and more evidence of improperly, deployed third parties in sensitive areas of the website, sniffing data that should not be accessible to them, leading to class action lawsuit. Most of the world's websites effectively are conducting key logging because of these scripts. There was an article a while back in Wired saying, the top 100,000 websites are effectively key logging your strokes before you even click go or submit. That's a potential issue, when you've got partners reading sensitive fields or sensitive areas of data that might be controlled by GDPR, might be controlled by HIPAA or other regimes. There's been lawsuits against Meta in the healthcare space where the script was deployed and Meta was sniffing sensitive healthcare information unbeknownst to the pharmacies that had the MetaPixel there. and leading to Meta, providing ads across social platforms, for services or treatments related to very sensitive, healthcare conditions. A big no-no. And so I want to bring up and just make sure it's clear that you understand you want to control this script, to make sure the bad guy can't compromise it and use it to its advantage. But you also want to make sure that the good guy, i.e., your partner, doesn't somehow step on your toes in the compliance world and put you in hot water. So, what can happen with the JavaScript that's out there, and what we see, time and time again with compromised JavaScript is, as I mentioned at the top of this part of the conversation, the script can do anything, right? So it's uncontrolled. It's not, it's there. It's got free reign over the website. It can read, write, whatever. It can change page content. And by that, what I mean is it could add, a form field or a button for a redirect to somewhere else outside of your control. It can record keystrokes. So, your traditional key logging, read into forms, steal the data, as it's being entered, add content, images, fields, etc. Track website behavior and user behavior, capture and exfil data, and even redirect visitors to websites under attack or control. And I think those are important, things to know when you think about the scope of what is under 4.0, and we'll get into a little bit of that conversation around scoping here in a minute, is that, like, because of those capabilities, the scope is a lot more broad than you think it might be, or that might be, sort of in the lexicon of your conversation. It's not just about a page. It's going to be about, flows, right? So anyway, so PCI said, okay, given all that background, given the threat, given what's emerged, given everything that's happened, you got this new gap to fill. And you got to do it. And you got to do it by March of 2025. But, again, my thesis is you should basically be getting this done now. Your traditional web app or web security solutions, end at the browser. So you've got to go further than that. And you can either build something or you can, procure something, right? So requirements basically say this. You've got to confirm that each script running on payment pages is authorized. You've got to ensure the integrity is maintained. You have to have an inventory of all those payment scripts and justify why they're there. You have to monitor payment pages for header changes at least once every 7 days, which is actually, I think, the most frequent requirement under PCI DSS 4.0 now. And you have to alert and block all malicious scripts on these payment pages. Okay, so those are like the 6 or 5. What is that? 5, 3? Yeah, 5 action words, that you need to do: confirm, assure, maintain, monitor, alert, and block. Right. That's all found underneath, 6.4.3 and 11.6.1. When you think about the scope and when we talk about like ways that we want to help it support you, we've got a couple pieces that, are helpful for scoping support. Expert guidance from Coalfire. So we're a PPO. We talked with a bunch of folks at the community meetings last year. I was there in the US in Dublin and, and even in Kuala Lumpur. And, part of the conversation was there's going to be a gap that exists between what the standard says and the interpretation of the standard and the knowledge of what to go do. Hey, source defense, one area you can help is to close this gap. And so we worked with Coalfire, to really look at the intent, behind, the requirements in 4.0 and, to really provide guidance on scope. And so I'll go into a little bit about that. I want to start by saying there's some common misconceptions that I hear time and time again related to scope. And these are things that sort of like are even evolving as the days and weeks go by. The first one is, I fully redirect my checkout to my e-commerce provider. So I'm good. None of this is in scope, right? So, I have a website. Maybe I'm in I hear this a lot out of higher education. I'm in the higher education space for my tuition payments or my sales on the bookstore or whatever. It's just a button on my website that takes it to a third-party e-commerce provider, and I don't have anything that I need to be, taken care of because I've outsourced that to them. Well, under 4.0 and under 6.4.3 and 11.6.1, the page on which the button sits is crucial and in scope. And in fact, the flows that lead to that are in scope as well. And here's why, because I mentioned up front that one of the things that the adversary can do with compromised script running on a web page is change the direction of where a link leads to, or add fields or add content that doesn't exist native to the website. So if I, the adversary, can take that page where your button goes and you click checkout, and I redirect it to myself versus letting it go to your third party, that's a problem, right? So yes, you still have scope, even if you're fully, outsourcing to an e-commerce provider. Um, Recently, some of the e-commerce providers are saying, "Well, cool, we're just going to block all scripts that run on the payment pages." Again, the idea in a lot of merchants' minds is, "Well, that's good. I'm good, right? Nothing to do here. Nothing to see. Nothing to do." Nope. Same argument, right? Even if the e-commerce provider and platform provider on the other side, is basically blocking out script from like the checkout process, it doesn't mean that there isn't further upstream requirements for you and scope for you related to script management across the website, right? I fully outsource payments. We've segregated this environment. Same argument. Or we only run first party scripts on our payment pages, so I don't have any third party partners. I'm not using Metapixel. I'm not using Chatbot. I'm not using any of that. That's actually one you got to understand. The first and third party scripts are both in scope. And that's all outlined, in the Coalfire white paper. Really, really want you to dig in and understand that, because it's a full stop. If you're thinking one thing about scope right now that may be completely misaligned with what either your QSA, if you're a level one, is going to expect to see when they go to do the AOC on your rock, or where you get into the SAQ, side of things, and you're attesting, but you're attesting incorrectly because you're not understanding scope. So what Coalfire has said in this paper is that what we really need to be focused on is payment flows. So page actually means flows, because compromised scripts can occur anywhere in the site, and because anywhere in the site they can be used to change the checkout process, right? Again, change page content, add content, redirect visitors to websites under control. Because of that, the scope has to be broader than just page. And it's interesting because they use the word page in the PCI DSS definition in 4.0, but if you really sort of layer it back and really read deeply into it, you realize they're probably saying flows just as well, because they're saying a payment page is a web-based user interface containing one or more form elements intended to capture account data. The payment case should be rendered as any one of a single document, for instance, i.e. a page, a document or component displayed in an inline frame within a non-payment page. Okay, so that gets to sort of the iframe conversation, and it's just an iframe, it's not a page in itself, or multiple documents or components, each containing one or more form elements contained in multiple inline frames within a non-payment. Well, it's a little bit confusing. It's like a little bit like head scratching, but basically, Coalfire is saying the entire payment flow is what needs protecting. So payment, not page, is the most important part of the definition. Okay, it can be a simple page, or it can be complex, multi-part workflows. Right, add to cart, and so they're basically saying any page understood by the consumer to be part of checking out, add to cart onward, really should be in scope. So it's about the payment flow. So when product gets added to cart and that point forward, you really need to be looking at what's going on those pages, and you really need to have controls in place, to protect that script that's running on those pages. Basically, if the consumer thinks they're doing business with you, they are. It's your risk to manage. And so you need to be thinking about this broader scope. Okay. So, that's one area, just one small element of the scoping conversation. We've had a lot of conversation around roles, responsibilities, where the handshakes, between yourselves, your service providers, et cetera, where the demarcation points are and what the roles, everybody's responsibility is in this process, including we talked to a lot of e-commerce platform providers, we talked to the PSPs, et cetera. We can help you with the starting point on this doc, just making sure you got the right, sort of understanding of what's going on, but happy to help you and answer any questions you may have and connect you with people as a part of this community, to, answer any and all questions you may have on scope. Okay. Another thing that we, said we can help you with is this build versus buy, or build versus procure kind of approach. Okay. And it's another white paper that we get to sort of fully release, but we'll give to everybody on the call today, that was put together by Viking Cloud. So Coalfire addressed the sort of the scope conversation, Viking Cloud kind of addressing, some of the pitfalls that you should look out for in this, conversation around build versus procure. I will tell you that probably in the last 2 months, we've had at least 5 to 10, I think it's probably about 10 merchants come to us and say, we went down the pathway of build and now we, realize that it's not going to be a tenable kind of situation for us. Now we're looking at vendors in market we're trying to procure. It's very important that you understand, what you're getting yourselves into. You might be a build shop, and that's totally fine. And we can provide you with guidance on that as well. We're happy to help whatever direction you want to go. But and you got to know, I think, is when you're getting into the build conversation, you're doing so that's basically going to create a multifaceted, multi-solution approach that's going to create more management requirements and more capability, that you may not have internally, that you're going to need to add as far as subject matter expertise is concerned. So when you think about what the requirements say, they basically say you've got to maintain integrity. Well, first of all, you got to justify, right? Authorize, monitor and maintain integrity, and then control behavior. Okay, those are effectively, sort of the things that you need to do over these scripts. And so for justification, you're gonna have to come up with some form of justification system. You're gonna have to have some kind of, I don't know, spreadsheet or documentation or workflow that you build around that. Same thing for script authorization. You're gonna have to be able to build some kind of manageable capability internally that says, here are the processes that must be followed. Here's the systems that we didn't have yesterday that now we're going to create, to enable those processes. Maybe not that hard of a proposition. Maybe you do have some form of GRC solution or whatever in place that kind of helps with some of that stuff. But then when it gets to the actual protection side of the conversation, you really start to get into some sticky water. SRI is one thing that's called out, sub resource integrity, inside the 4.0 tool controls guidance, right? So is CSP. SRI, is good for the integrity side of things. CSP, some very, very significant shortcomings as it relates to behavior control over the script on the site. And Viking Cloud, calls out those considerations around CSP, primarily as the complexity, the overblocking and underblocking, and the maintenance burden that comes along with it. So complexity, you got to implement, you got to manage, you got to maintain these CSP policies, which require really, really deep technical knowledge that are going to put a strain on resources, and that are actually going to require you to have the ability to understand not only what the static behavior of a script is, but also to somehow track all of the dynamic behaviors of a script. And that's an important note. We have a client that's been with us for probably 3 or 4 years now, massive consumer packaged good brand out of the United Kingdom. And they are seeing something like 4 or 5,000 changes to script on an annual basis because of the dynamic nature of the script, right? It changes based on time of day or location or based on user action. And so when you think about CSP, which is kind of like a whitelisting sort of approach, you're really going to have to develop a level of technical expertise and tracking that's pretty much like enterprise class, and it's very difficult to do. On the overblocking, underblocking end of things, CSP is static. It's binary almost, right? Yes, allow, don't allow. Could it result in overblocking or underblocking against malicious content? On the overblocking side of things, you may disable functionality and break the website. On the underblocking side of things, you may, conversely have to allow things that may get you into some of those hot water situations, like I mentioned, with like other forms of compliance, like GDPR and some of the others. And then just the requirement to continuously monitor, update, maintain. Somebody's got to be in charge of it. It's got to be almost a near full-time focus. So they call out the advantages of behavior-based defense solutions, which is obviously what we do. Proactive threat detection, dynamic adaptability, simplified implementation, and really enabling an improved user experience. We'll get that to you as well. I think those are two really good pieces that come from the number one, number two QSACs in the world. One that helps you with scope, one that helps you with sort of guiding the internal process. There'll be more on that conversation that we can support, as I mentioned. So don't be shy. We really do want to provide sort of a consultative approach. I'm going to be looking at time here, so I'm going to skip ahead. Another thing that we want to offer to you guys is team education and Ask Me Anything sessions. So we, again, have been doing this for forever. We are experts in the space, and we really are, I'd say a trusted partner around the world, to the QSACs, including, with the PCI Council, to, a lot of satisfied merchants. And so, what we're offering for you guys is the ability to come in and do one of two sort of like layers of depth trainings for your teams, completely free. There'll be online training sessions, right? We'll do it something similar to this. We can schedule it about 2 weeks out, so it can't happen tomorrow, but it can happen fast. And we've got training that's been built from years of experience in this. We'll let you know what the problem is. We'll let you know, what the solutions are that you can, go down the pathway, of exploring. We'll make sure that, the various stakeholders in your organization, whether it be security or compliance or web dev or e-commerce, are all bought in and all understanding what the problem is, what's going on, why they need to address this, how they can address it, what they're going to need to do moving forward to maintain and support compliance. It can be real high level, could be deep dive and technical. We can build that around whatever your need is, but we want to make that available to you. We've done these cyber academy trainings extensively in the past. We've probably trained up hundreds, if not thousands, of resources. We want to help you on that front, right? So something you can avail yourself of. As we hear a lot, it's like herding all the cats and getting everyone on the same page. This is something we want to offer to get you everyone on the same page. Pre-project website analysis or assessment. We have built a PCI focused dashboard that some of you may have seen. It's like our freeware solution that exists out there. We can get that done, and within a couple of days, from the outside looking in, can give you an initial assessment of your website or websites, and provide you a dashboard that gives you the ability to see it all, make it tangible, that provides the initial phases of management for the process, and that makes a single pane of glass that you and your QSAs can look at, to evaluate what's going on and what the pure scope of any controls based applications will be. We broke it down and made it really layman's so that it answers the questions that are going to need to be answered in your ROC or in your SAC. We inventory all the scripts that we find. We give you a full visibility and tree looking into what those scripts are, when they were deployed, what they're doing, who owns them, etc. We also show you the scripts that those scripts call upon, and that's what we call shadow scripts. So there's like your third party partner, i.e. Meta, may be calling on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other scripts that are now needing to be controlled because they're being pulled into the user session. We'll give you full visibility on that. We'll give you the ability to start the conversation around justification. So this kind of almost becomes like a mini compliance management dashboard for you. And then we'll start the scanning for you on the web header side of things on the weekly basis. And we'll provide you with some alerts on things that relate to problems in the behavior of these scripts. This is all just pre-assessment work, right? This is all sort of like, okay, this is what our new life is going to have to look like. What's our baseline? Where do we stand today? Let's talk this out. Let's start getting everybody thinking about this element of security control and of compliance management. Happy to do all that. That's free, and we can make that happen. Just give us the payment page URLs. And we can make that happen as early as like the next 2 days, where you can start to look at that. And then our team will come in and we'll guide you through all of what you're finding, because a lot of it's going to be like Greek to most of the people in the organization. They're not going to know what it is, what it means, and we'll help you with that. And so that is one of the things we want to make available, as well as group QSA working sessions. So what we're hearing a lot from some of the level 1 merchants is, I got to get started on this. We're waiting to talk to our QSA. We haven't gotten engaged yet. We have until March. We need their advice. We need them to understand. Now, what you got to understand is that your QSA probably doesn't have the visibility into this problem either. They can provide you some guidance, and we have worked with, as I mentioned, multiple times here, multiple hundreds of the world's QSACs and hundreds of the QSAs. Chances are your QSA knows us. They probably have hopefully a respected opinion of us. That pre-project website assessment can be shared with them. It's a single pane of glass platform that we can share with them. And we can start working with you guys and your QSA, to discuss scope, controls approaches, the timetable to action, and what the expectations are going to be for documentation for your next ROC. And I think that's really, really important, because I don't think that that's probably something that has been really, really well defined. What are they going to have to accept to see to attest to the fact that you have controls that are effective and in place, for that rock, that's a conversation that should happen now. And so, I think in a lot of cases, it was one or two things, right? Your QSA is viewed as like the auditor that you talk to once a year, and man, he's going to rake you over the coals, or she's going to rake you over the coals. Or the other side is like trusted advisor that I don't want to get moving on anything until I talk to them. We want to be in the middle with you on that. If they're your trusted advisor, we can help you and them get on the same page with you, help educate on this. If you consider them more of the auditor, that you're kind of the scary, pay no attention behind the Wizard of Oz kind of guy, we can help bring them to the table early. So just think about that as something as well. You don't have to be shy. We can help educate, you and help the QSAs get moving. On the 90-day action plan, we have the ability to get you from 0 to compliant in 90 days or less. Okay. And so this is probably the one that reaches most closely into, sort of like a sales engagement with us. But there is value in our 90-day action plan outside of whether or not you use us. But I will do and tout, our own capabilities here as I talk about this. So, we're friends with the PCI Dream Team. We did a PCI Dream Team webinar about a month and a half, 2 months ago. The guys that wrote the book on PCI compliance, if you will, to the man, we're basically like, screaming, don't wait until the last minute. Start looking at this now. You hear 2025 and you think that's so far away, but it's right around the corner. In fact, I think if I did this right, March 1st, 2025 is 289 days from now. I just asked my phone this morning, so I may be wrong about that, but that's not very far from now. And if you do code freeze in October, you effectively lose 90 days of that window to get moving. It's going to be a tight game to get this done if you don't get moving right away. Suppliers are scarce. There's only a handful of us in the space. We think we're, at the top of the crop at that, but, you'll have to make that assessment. So you're going to have to do, some looking around in the market. And so are a million other merchants. And we're feeling, the sort of wave of, merchant engagement happening now. It's been ongoing for a while, but it's really, really starting to kick in. And so I would say get moving. And we've got a plan of action to get this one done, because you got about 49 other changes in 4.0 you got to look at in 90 days or less, and get you from 0 to compliant and get this out of the way. And what we typically do with our clients, we literally just closed, working with a client on the sales process in 23 days. 23 days. What we typically do is we try and manage it as like, this is not your father's Oldsmobile in terms of other security controls and security tech you've had to purchase. We want to move you fast through the process. Testing is super easy. What we typically say is the first couple of weeks are just discovery. And that's kind of where you guys are today, right here at discovery. What do you have? What do you need? What's out there? What do we do next, right? We can provide you guidance on that. And then again, that's where the pre-assessment thing comes into play, or where the group training comes into play, or the QSA conversations, any of that stuff, right? Or again, the details around scoping, like you're doing discovery. So, once you want to move, our eval process is, roughly, we have it outlined here about 2 weeks. Most of that is the internal process on your end, identifying teams, analyzing, and agreeing to a timetable. And then like procurement, we're trying to move through in as fast as 30 days, and then you're deployed. I mean, we literally did one client overnight that had suffered a major breach. They were brought to us by their PFI, and we had it from the conversation to deployed in 24 hours. So we can make that happen for you. Our, approach is to get it done fast, get it done cost effectively, get it done painlessly, give you a solution that doesn't require a bunch of internal expertise. Eval in as little as a week, support your process, delivered in, to get through, and then get delivered in a few days. So, we're trying to help streamline this process for you. We're trying to help educate, trying to give you the tools that you need, and happy to do all of that. Really just as a member of this community that we feel so proud to be a part of. So that's all I kind of had for today. Wanted to give you background on us, wanted to give you background on the problem, wanted to talk a little bit about the requirements, and go through some of those elements of guidance, and then give you, some of those links to tools that you can avail yourself with. I believe, unless this chat is Scott telling me that I haven't been, okay, good. All right. So Scott has put in the chat links to all of these resources. So you can request, any number of different things there, whether it be the team training, or the dashboard, or the 90-day action plan, or even just watch the guidance from the folks on the PCI Dream Team. It's all there available to you. Yeah, we've got a few minutes. I don't know if there's any questions that anybody wants to ask. I'm happy to stick around and do those, and just let me know. I'm not seeing any open questions in the little Q&A window. It's totally fine if you don't have them today. We'll get them answered for you in follow up. But let's just take maybe a minute or two and let you throw anything out there that you might have. And if we don't see anything here, then I will let you guys get back to your day. So I wish I had one of those Jeopardy theme song kind of things to play at this moment. But yeah, if you've got questions, let us know. I'll take a sip of water or two, and if I don't see something in a minute, we'll drop. Oh, okay. Well, here we go. Okay. All right. Oh, wow. Okay, we got a bunch of these. Okay, so does sandboxing all our JavaScript and allowing source defense to be the gatekeeper of everything have site speed implications? Okay, nope. In fact, in a lot of cases, so yeah, that's the number one question that we get, and like that's where I mentioned a couple of times bringing web dev to the table, or the e-commerce team to the table. In fact, in a lot of cases, we see performance improvement, because source defense can control what's loaded when, and that's a conversation that we can have. And so, no, we've not seen any noticeable downturn in site performance. Does that become kind of like Google talisman or sources you want to suppose? Yes. So effectively, if you want to look at it that way, so the question is, does source defense effectively become like a Google tag manager? So you're the one responsible for kicking off all the rest of the JavaScript. Yes, that is effectively what we're doing. We are the script to rule all scripts, if you will. And we are there then, able to apply behavioral based controls, over top of those scripts. We're not changing the behavior of the script, in the sense of it's still functioning the way it's supposed to, and the website is still going to function the way it was built. What we're doing is we're controlling the script, what the script has access to be able to do. So if that makes sense, we're saying, we're not going to allow read of sensitive fields. We're not going to allow write, on sensitive pages, things of that nature. We've got a lot of questions in this one question. I want to make sure, hang on, we've got a couple others. Do you have a formatted skimmer training to share with the staff that could be shared? We do have some recordings on the Cyber Academy end of things. Instead of like sort of coming in customized. If you want to drop me a note, it's just steve@sourcedefense.com. We can just have a conversation as to whether or not what we have is going to be, the right fit for what you're looking for. So just let me know. What HTTP headers are we talking about need to be monitored at least once a week? So is that a combination of the HTTP headers and the content of the page, like the entire DOM? I'm going to reserve that conversation for somebody with better technical background than me in terms of exactly what's in scope there. We can make one of our guys available, to answer that one. So same idea on that. If I'm not able to answer a question, just drop me a note, steve@sourcedefense.com. I'll connect you up with one of our technical resources who can take it from there. What responsibility does source defense take if we were to have an adverse event? What is covered in the SLA? Again, a conversation that we have to have, kind of in better depth than what I've got right at my fingertips. But we source defense is moving very rapidly along with our own compliance assessment, and so we will be a SAC-D AOC'd service provider, and so we can talk about scope and responsibility and where the service provider / merchant handoff takes place. So I appreciate you guys very much. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I hope this was helpful. I hope what's coming across is obviously we are an organization and we want to sell, and we want to help you, But I hope what's really coming across is we do believe in this community involvement, and we do want to help you in that regard. So don't be shy. Just because we have something that we want you to buy and deploy or whatever doesn't mean we don't want you to be successful in this. Truly at heart, that's kind of who we are as people. And so, if you have questions, we'll answer them. And it doesn't have to lead to buying our stuff. Okay, so look at us as a community member. We'll see you at the community meetings. Get moving on this. Don't get stuck behind the eight ball. And honestly, like treat it as a security concern. The risk is already there. The bad guys are already doing this. They're not waiting for March of next year. They're doing it right now. Okay. So get moving. Good luck. Keep fighting the good fight. And thank you for your time today.